Okay. This House is now in session. We are order number 7. Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to add to this discussion, to this resolution, and to thank the Honourable Member for St. Andrew and his counterpart from St. John for having the vision to bring it at this time. But it would be remiss of me, let me say, if I do not put my first focus on where the Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast would have concluded. I also want to extend my sympathy, and I'm sure that the rest of Barbados will want to extend their sympathy to the resident, that young man who lost his life under such tragic circumstances. It is heart-wrenching, it is tragic, it is unfortunate for someone to lose his or her life in that way, especially when they're in their prime. I do not know, as a mother, what I would do in a matter of that nature. And I mean do now, not anything adversarial or anything cruel or inhumane to anybody, but I'm talking about the actual feeling in the bowels and in the heart to have seen my child, my relative, my friend, my neighbor die in such a way. And I'm not blaming anybody in respect of that, but I'm saying it is so unfortunate for a young person to go out in the prime of his or her life in that way. I don't know, when you think of him being a sharp, active, bubbly, healthy young man, and to go like that, all we can say is God had a plan for him, and he has gone to the great beyond. But I'm sure from the sentiments that were expressed by other residents and others, it seems to me as though he was a tremendous young man with great potential. But as I said, God has his plan, but I pray that there will be no one else having to die in that cruel way as it was in his instance last week. I wish to take this opportunity to extend my deepest sympathy to the grieving relatives and the whole community in the Pine, St. Michael, and in other places in Barbados. And I want to say that we should try our best to be more proactive, that a matter such as this will not be repeated. And it can only be done because of the emphases that would have been discussed with the Honourable Minister and the Member of Parliament to be able to bring such challenges as are faced in the, particularly, they're all over the country, but particularly in the housing areas where there are so many large numbers of persons living, and of course the repairs in such state. I know, Mr. Speaker, that every year as a government we had formal reports done, annual reports, audited reports on the National Housing Corporation, of which I asked for some of them, and I hold 3 in my hand, sir. 2004 to 5, 2006 to 7, 2007 to 8. Those are the ones I received, and I started to browse through them. And I saw the kind of professional reporting that is necessary so we could know how many wells were fixed or clean or sunk. We could know how many firewalls were repaired, how much fiberglass was taken off, not fiberglass, asbestos was taken from the roof of those houses, the kinds of upgrades that would have taken place, and the plans going forward. And I am mystified that a government that says it's called Dear Loving People then could have sat and seen communities deteriorate to that level, living conditions, and not raise a finger except to make the people happy Because once it comes to hearing about ownership of a piece of this rock, people will be happy. But there's absolutely no way that those houses should have been handed over to those persons unless the infrastructural works were attended to. If you're going to give people something, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, give them something good. Give them something that they can feel proud of, because we all know the persons living in those communities generally do not have the wherewithal to be able to do the upgrades themselves. And I can speak of a former honourable member for St. James South, who made every effort while she was there to make corrections. So I know that firewalls were installed. I know that some of the communal wells were upgraded to be able to make sure that people live comfortably, that the odors and the dangers and so on will not have impacted upon them. But we left office in 2008. And as a result, it seems as though everything else was put on the back burner. I pray that the people living in the housing areas and in other communities where there are challenges of that nature would not have to face such a kind of travesty ever again. I want also, Mr. Speaker, to say it is not only in housing areas, but the Ministry of Public Works has got a lot of work to do as well. There are times when the rain falls, when people are walking on the streets and they fall into a manhole that is left open. For me, that is just as bad as a well. Serious injury. There are also wells and caps that are put on wells when you're walking along the corridors of certain government buildings. And you can see the corrosion in the metal that they're made of, or the cracks in the slabs that are put in, and little or nothing seems to be done. If we're going to do things, we should do them right. And I believe that this Barbados Labour Party, again, will make a tremendous difference in the lives of Barbadians, because we've asked them to put their trust in us, and they gave us all 30. We're now 30 minus 1, but we will still carry on our role and remember the people of St. Michael West, because they too shared in the vision. They too made the commitment, matching what we said in our covenant of hope, matching what we said in our manifesto. We will deliver, and we shall deliver with God's help, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. Now, in relation to what would have happened, and sometimes it's always go to the past to get back to the future, or to the present first. I support this resolution for the 79 spots in Colleton and St. Lucie. As a matter of fact, I feel a little jealous, and I'm still waiting, Mr. Speaker, but Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will get to that, because it says that the then Honourable Member of St. Lucie, for me, a lost case, to have come to St. Thomas for 47 spots that were in 40 acre, to help for housing for the people of St. Thomas, because I have absolutely not one housing area, and I don't want any either. Because when I see how my colleagues are suffering, and the lamentations as a result of what is happening in those communities with the housing and open spaces and the overcrowding and so on, I gave mine to St. James Central, the Bagatelle, and the Redmonds Village area. And I know that I can speak for my honourable colleague who is not here because he's out on government's business. He too has some tremendous challenges, similar to those in the Pine and in the other communities across Barbados, Watton and so on. And I'm sure that he would wish me to say he too needs to have some more remedial works done to upgrade those houses that are, to the rest of me, that have been my neighbours and my friends and my constituents previously. But those 47 spots in 40 acre, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, were requested and acquired by the last administration by agitation. And I felt proud to know that I'll be able to get some more houses, because poor people will pay for their house spots and their houses once they are working. Very few will abdicate their responsibility. And you know what, Mr. Deputy Speaker? I'll say over and over again. The 47 spots were distributed to people all over the rest of Barbados. And my folk in 40 acre and Allen View and Hopewell and those communities who applied have not got a single spot. The said minister who looked after it had by then been gone. And another minister, the honourable member then for St. Lucie, sat and determined that not one spot will be given to anybody in St. Thomas. Can you imagine that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, though? I go out, I write the letter, I go on the tours, everything, and then not one spot. No wonder why he thought that 20% was more than 80. I am now seeing it going on in his head. I have people in Allen View, sir, who have tremendous challenges as well with living conditions and with acquisition or access to spots. At least there are also some who cannot develop, put a shed, anything on the spots that they have in that village. Some of them were to be assigned to the 40-acre location to lift some of the heavy population that is growing in Allen View and give them to a sense of hope and independence through those spots. And it hurts me to know that those folks are still in there. Some can't even get a drop of water unless they get it from a neighbor. Some still have to have pit toilets in a place that is the eighth wonder of the world, that every visitor who comes to Barbados wants to go to see Harrison's Cave. And those 47 spots were given away. I am happy and I pray that the honourable member for St. Lucie will get the opportunity to get a percentage of those spots, that he can bring a measure of comfort and achievement to the people of St. Lucie, and he already made it very clear, I don't expect all. We in the Labour Party don't expect all, because we believe in giving and sharing, because there are others who are in need. Even if the honourable member for St. Michael West persons had applied and wanted, they too will get through, because we believe in dividing up the cake properly and evenly so that all Barbadians can benefit. And therefore, I want to lend my support to this as well. The other thing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is to do with what that last administration did. Because we saw how they went ahead and built these high-story buildings at an extremely high cost that the Auditor General had to criticize them. Yes, people in the city and people in the environs or the suburban areas must get housing as well. But the way they went about it, they built these high-story locations knowing that the persons they were building for, that they had pledged to, that there will be these gas station attendants and janitors and general workers and teachers, police officers, got houses built at the highest ever cost. And then these people have to be paying $800, $1,000 a month for facilities that we know they will not be able to meet the criteria. So who will benefit? Persons who were in a higher bracket receiving salaries compared, and these people would have been left out of the loop. It is so sad. But to add insult to injury there, the Housing Credit Fund, that is a fund that is supposed to be able to provide funding that persons can get houses and government can build and make sure that the ordinary folk as well can live in peace and harmony and in decency, they bastardize the Housing Credit Fund, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. And it bothers me when people speak about education being given to them for free, and they can come as an administration and destroy, mash up, break up, lick up, and then expect Barbadians to sit down and tolerate it for another 5 years. I say that is wrong. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to say, sir, that I believe that the folks in St. Lucie and those who will be able to access those spots, sir, will get that opportunity, sir, to be able to do their building. Those who can afford, through the community spirit. It is something I always advocated. Our parents of our time did not have the money or lending agencies, but they would throw meat in turn. And whenever they did it, men and other artisans in the village would come, and on a Saturday morning, they will lift off the wooden part of the house, and they will build from the back and come forward, or from the front and go backward. That caused funds to be generated in the village. It held the community spirit, and it showed that we in these little villages have got skills too, and we can offer quality work and service. And I hope that those persons who may not be able to access the funds because the Housing Credit Fund was destroyed by the Democratic Labour Party, will get an opportunity through purchasing these spots to be able to do it in that way and still be able to be empowered with their housing. Now, I know that the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, being a minister before, and the policies that were set out by the then leader, the Right Honourable Member who's from St. Peter as Prime Minister, caused a building boom to take place in Barbados because a lot of people have sharp minds. And when that last administration came in, all you hear is 14 years and nothing to show, not a house. And some of the same people that were in this chamber and the other place, sir, that were saying nothing was done, bought houses through the building boom in some of those communities that the Ministry of Housing and Lands and the National Housing Corporation had built. As a matter of fact, sir, one was the opponent for the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, and now in Garden blocking roads with cars that people can't pass by the same house that was bought through this government with the 100% mortgage that the Mortgage Finance Corporation was offering to Barbadians because Barbadians needed to be empowered. That the then Honourable Member and those who followed him in the Ministry of Housing was able to say the General Workers Fund must be made available, and poor people who met the criteria could borrow up to $100,000 to be able to build and improve their houses. And that is why when we look across the landscape of Barbados, generally we see houses that are sturdy, and the whole general environs of a lot of our communities have been changed. And that is not the only reason though, you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker. An administration of 1976 to 1981 determined that the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act must facilitate persons in plantation areas who were living on those properties for a period of time. And Barbados has been transformed. Our housing stock is good. I am not saying it is the best, but what was done was to empower Barbadians to be able to live more comfortably, to have the necessary sanitation, and to have the infrastructural works put in place that they can live happier. And so I also want to add that that building boom came about as a result of the Barbados Labour Party's initiative of making sure that the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, the Barbados Community College, and the Barbados Vocational Training Board extended their programs in the evening as well, so that other persons will learn the necessary skills to be able to build and to do it to standards that are different. I can boast of 2 houses I know over in Eden Lodge, sir, that the students from the Barbados Vocational Training Board constructed, and they're 2 of the most beautiful houses, sir, in those environs. And it says that we have the skills, but we lapsed a lot over the 10 years when that last administration was there, and a lot of our young people have not been able to develop skills, and we had to bring in persons from overseas and so to be able to assist us, and there's nothing wrong with that. I welcome our Caribbean neighbors, but we want for our Barbadians to become the best joiners, carpenters, entrepreneurs, you name it. And the Barbados Labour Party did that, and that is the reason why our housing stock and so on started to build up. I know that we must conform with the building standards, and I agree, because the hurricane season and any high wind shows us sometimes that we have not conformed with the necessary standards to go forward. And I believe that persons who go to get their mortgages, to borrow, make the loans, to be able to muster the money, people still save money in the home, to be able to improve the quality of their living, should be able to follow those building standards and make sure they make the best of it, especially times like now where they should also have a good insurance policy to be able to help them to save their houses. I lament, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we have a high level of squatting taking place in this country. It is not the culture of Barbadians to do it, but we cannot just look at them and shuttle them away. This government will work with them to be able to give them solutions to what is happening now, because we recognize that our water systems must always be kept clean. We recognize that the sewage must be properly disposed of, and that we must follow environmental policies to be able to live safer and happier in the various communities where we live. And I am sure that the plans that have been unveiled by the Honourable Prime Minister and the team in the Barbados Labour Party will help to stymie those processes where during that 10-year period we saw houses go up anywhere, everywhere. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South, Southeast, spoke about extensions to houses this morning. Some of that too will add to it, but we are not lamenting that now. Going forward, I want for this administration, whether I am here or not, it will please my heart and my old age to be at home sitting and observing transformation in those various communities. And when persons say the Labour Party did not do anything, you only got to look at London-born and how the city of Bridgetown has been upgraded. You only have to look down by Baxter's Road, Kensington Lodge, and see. You only have to move around Barbados. And if I look through this book, Mr. Deputy Speaker, so I can call so many communities. And when it comes to rural Barbados, you go down to Dingstown. You go down to Orange Hill Development. You come into Cane Garden and Cane Garden Park, Cane Garden Heights, and other communities across the length and breadth of Barbados. When you go on the highway, all those houses there, that new pavilion on the hill, when you pass the banks roundabout, they call it. All those houses were put in place. Low Burnie? Is it? If the Low Burnie is one too. But you can see the transformation of Barbados in that 14-year period. We want to continue on that trajectory, but conforming with the town planning laws and the building codes to make sure that the housing solutions that we develop help these people to be able to achieve and to live more comfortably in what they're doing. I know that the 49 house plots are going to be developed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'm praying that what we saw in the past does not happen again. It may be happening now, but we have to arrest it as a people and as a government that cares and that people have put their trust and confidence in us. What I witnessed during the building boom was that a lot of small contractors were given opportunities to be able to help to repair schools, to build houses, to upgrade them, to do roads and so on. During that last decade, all the big conglomerates seem to have had the opportunity, and the small men got pushed out. I am not prepared to call the names of any of those companies here today, but if we are going to be talking about developing an entrepreneurship spirit and to empower ordinary people and to empower others, we need to get back to that stage where we give opportunities for persons who are what we consider to be ordinary but have got the skills, have got the resources to be able to do it. We need to give them a little chance to step in the door and to be able to get the opportunity with practice to be able to then reach the level of conglomerates so that they too can reach back into this society and bring along some others. Many of those young contractors and new ones in the business who were just beginning to perk and to uplift themselves and to offer the quality service were shut down one time with the last administration, starting with rural and urban, where people's houses were left undone because of the spiteful way you heard, oh, it's a contractor from St. Thomas, or once he comes from St. Thomas, he's a B. St. Thomas has about 12,000 people, Mr. Deputy Speaker, who can vote, but I got just under half of that. So it means that the other half didn't really care about me, or they didn't go, or they were ill, or they had died, whatever. And I'm saying, I do not want the Barbados Labour Party to be out there segmenting people. You is a D, you is a B, P what? Whatever the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Party name, I do not want that. Because at the end of the day, breadfruit, we are one people. And I believe that the cake should be sliced up to facilitate everybody. I am not going to go down the line with anybody to discriminate Barbadians who can offer a service, most of the time second to none, but because of where they live or who is their friend, they are shuttled into a corner. And that last administration did that, left a lot of people's houses not completed. They have not looked back at them. As a matter of fact, I can't tell you, I get 2 houses in St. Thomas fixed in 10 years.
I remember you have
Despite
5 minutes.
Yes,
5
Mr.
minutes
Deputy
to
Speaker, a wrap up. I just want to say, sir, on another note, some of them are unscrupulous. They treat people very unkindly. They do not, some of them do, I mean, these are some of the contractors now, are bigger than the ones who did not get the chance to conclude. Some of them are not offering quality housing to the people of Barbados, and the cost is tremendously high. The Barbados Labour Party understood the pulse of the people and treated to it. The Democratic Labour Party used people as pawns to survive. And let me tell you that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, has come to a close. They promised in the manifesto of 2008 that a $400,000 VAT-free initiative will be done for first-time homeowners. My people in Canefield, St. Thomas, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is waiting for the VAT-free amount from their houses. And when they wrote to the BRA told them, you are a first-time owner, but you cannot claim. It is the contractor. And that seems to be going on across Barbados. We have a petition, I can say it here because I can be put in the newspaper again. Nobody will touch me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I am unbought and unbossed. And I'm going to say every time, I don't want any contributions from those people who are unscrupulous. I don't take contributions at all. When I have, sir, I spend, and when I don't have, I don't spend, I don't beg. Because I was never taught like that as a little country girl, coming up through the origins, worse than the honourable member for St. Michael's South who spoke earlier. But I'm here, and I'm going to represent the people of Barbados, not just St. Thomas, but across the length of this country, because once there are people who have needs, their needs will be met incrementally or fully, because we are one people. And I close by saying, sir, I am going to bring that petition to this honourable chamber, and I'm going to come with a parliamentary question, because it did not, the legislation did not say the 400,000 as was promised. It went to 150,000. But yet when my people apply, BRA is telling them you don't meet the qualifications. Although they are first-time home owners, it would have helped them to buy a water tank. Christchurch's member of parliament would tell me it would have helped them to buy a water tank, because we have little or no water up there again, and that money has not reached them. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to finally say, too many businesses that would have loaned money or helped with loans for ordinary people most of the time, but for other people generally, are so divisive and wicked. So many young people who got that little stepping stone to get in to own a house are now pilloried. These people are pilloried by some lending agencies, and they are losing their homes again across Barbados. Some of them would have come out from the BERT program as a result of being retrenched, and because they're not meeting the criteria now to pay in as much, some of them are being threatened day and night that they will take away the house. Mr. Deputy Speaker, nobody's like for somebody to tell you every week and send you a memo, send you a letter, harass you, when they know that these are the same people who came in and said, I'll borrow the $50,000. But give them a chance to be able to treat to it. The banks are doing it worse than some of those other institutions, but I pray that we will find a way, because the worst thing in the world, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is for persons to be evicted, especially with children. They lose all the furniture, they lose their pride, they lose their dignity, they lose everything. We have to get back to the honourable member's project, as he did over in Farmers St. Thomas, acquire the land, build a few houses, but leave house spots available, so when people are disenfranchised, their houses are burnt, they get flooded away, washed away, whatever, provision is made for them. The last administration, as far as I can recall, sold out all, if not most of those spots, and that is why the folks in White Hill now are squinting to find somewhere to live, because our government did not act decisively and professionally in treating to the needs of people. And so I want to say, sir, thank you for the privilege. I pray that we will continue to look after the people of Barbados, despite their color, class, or creed, and to give them that hope that they will continue to work assiduously to be empowered to go from one level to the next, were it not for policies in the 1960s and 70s and 80s and 90s that helped to lift persons of my parents and their caliber to the level where they are now, we will never be in here, because we would have missed the bus to opportunity that should have been available. So I say, Mr. Speaker, lastly, when it comes to those communities with the housing units, any project that is coming on board, I ask that we in this Barbados Labour Party make sure that once there are 25 houses or more, that there are open spaces for people to recreate, for the generational linkages to happen, where the seniors will be on the bench table, the little children are running along, there's conversation, there's history, there are Bible and spiritual matters, there are moral things that are happening, because it will be an integrated approach that for me would be most cohesive, because our elderly too are suffering at the hands of many people in all of the professions, and in a number of ways that if we don't embrace them now, we're going to lose more of them, and we're going to lose that history, that cohesiveness, that generation of persons who worked in the hot burning sun and in the rain to be able to build this society that we can now come here and be a parliament of colored people only. We must step back into our communities and our villages and lift up more people and bring them along, but we must focus on the housing first. If your house is a covering over your head, then you can do these myriad things that can help to make a tremendous difference in the lives of generations to come. And so I want to commend the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member from St. Lucie, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, and the staff at the Ministry of Housing for coming up with this set of projects so that more Barbadians can receive more housing solutions to help them feel more empowered to be able to live in peace and in harmony in our villages in this country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to thank.
I'm obliged. Member for St. Michael West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And just to clarify, with your permission, for the Honourable Member out of St. Thomas, that I stand in here, this Honourable Chamber, to represent the interests of the people of St. Michael West. And to further clarify, that the name of the party in whose name I now speak, I speak these days, is the People's Party. And yes, part of our symbol is the breadfruit leaf.
The breadfruit
is representative of that food which is widely accessible to Barbadians, even in the harshest of times, and was first introduced here as the kind of nutritious food which would support the Barbadian spirit and body through the harsh experience of slavery. And I could spend more time elucidating on that, but now is not the occasion for so doing. But just to put on record, People's Party for Democracy and Development, more popular in North, the People's Party. But I speak here in the name of the people of St. Michael West. Having said that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to join the Honourable Member for St. Thomas in expressing a sense of empathy with the community of the Pine and with the Member of Parliament for the Pine in this very sad hour in their experience in the wake of the recent tragedy involving the life of a young boy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the viciousness of traditional opposition politics would suggest an opportunity to go after the government today, even on that matter. The viciousness of politics generally would suggest to the government, perhaps, that it is an opportune time to go after the last administration and prosecute them for a dereliction of duty with reference to a lack of maintenance. My disposition is not that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I do not believe that people's grief presents for us an opportunity to score political points and to engage in cheap political attacks. I have vowed ever since I crossed this floor never to engage. I have vowed ever since I crossed this floor never to engage in the business of opposing for opposing's sake or to score cheap political points. That is why, you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some people still suggest he sounds very much still like a bee when he speaks, and he does not go after the government as he should. It is because they are accustomed to a style of opposition politics which I don't plan to represent. When you are right, you are right. When you do good, you will be credited. When your actions are questionable, they'll be held up for scrutiny. I see that as my responsibility. And as I said, and I do re-emphasize, never simply to engage in opposing for opposing's sake or taking advantage of people's darkest hour to score cheap political points. No, government is a continuum. Government is a continuum. And those who lead in the administration of our affairs, government is not just the party in office. Government is an institution. Government is a continuum, and those who lead in the administration of this country's affairs need always to bear in mind, and prominently so, that we are called upon and expected, therefore, to carry out a duty circumstances notwithstanding. And one could say 10 years of neglect contributed to this business. One on the other side would stand and say 13 months in office is long enough time to fix a well. That is not what this debate should be about. What this debate should be about is an understanding that though we give urgent attention to those macro things which are part of our critical mission, we also need to give attention to those things not so macro, the everyday things that critically and urgently demand our attention as a government as well, especially in matters of life and death, potentially. And I don't want to say anything more on that, because to me, this debate is larger than that issue. I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that government has to be more strategic in its thinking. And when I say government, I don't mean the present administration solely or even necessarily. I mean the institution of government in our small state constrained circumstances. Government needs to be more strategic in the business of housing people in Barbados, especially when it comes to working class people. We have historically been a bit ad hoc. We have been historically been a bit reactionary. We have been periodic and intermittent in our efforts. And especially now we have come into a sustained era where government financially, economically is constrained. Government feels, it seems, almost a sense of impotence about the business of fulfilling its mission to be a facilitator of housing in Barbados, especially with reference to the working class people of Barbados. And we need to be more strategic about this business of housing, especially now in these straitened circumstances. Philosophically, I think there needs to be a shift. I've said before, government continues to believe that its primary role is to provide housing. My view is that government better so can perform, and more urgently so perform, the function of providing land and giving people an opportunity, perhaps with even further government support, to go about the business of building on their own, especially as communities in Barbados. we need to understand, and clearly so, philosophically, but also strategically, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that it goes beyond providing housing. Even if you understand the priority and the urgency attaching to providing land, we need to go beyond providing housing and philosophically to understand and strategically to plan and formulate policies such that what we're doing is engaging in community building rather than simply providing housing. This is the essence of what the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central said in his submission. And I applaud him at his rather youthful and tender age to be able to appreciate that. This is what the Honourable Member for St. Michael South said to a certain extent. We should be about the business of building communities and not simply providing housing. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think strategically we need to make a shift. Philosophically, we need to be guided by something which is more progressive insofar as our policy formulation and so on is concerned. It takes an inordinate length of time for a government through the NHC to be able to provide housing for working class people in Barbados. You ask anybody in the ministry, anybody in the NHC, anybody in this honourable chamber, and they will tell you that we are bombarded frequently by constituents whose experience is that of having listed or registered or applied at NHC 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I met a lady, not from St. Michael West. I actually met her in Christchurch. But I'm not too sure what constituency that is because I'm not too sure about the boundaries. But in Christchurch, 14 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 14 years she has been an applicant at the NHC. And that is a short time. I almost felt tempted to say to her, because I've met several others who have applied longer than that. So government is not in a position to provide or supply housing units for such people at the rate that is commensurate with the demand for such. And we have to understand that radically we need to change the lot, L-O-T, the lot, the experience, the reality for many out there. Some of them are single parents, mostly single mothers, single income earners, Mr. Deputy Speaker, have hardly any chance of owning house or land in Barbados. And in the current congested situation with reference to applications at NHC, they have very little chance of getting a unit at the hands of government. We need to understand that there are large numbers of persons who are single income earners in Barbados who do not stand a chance of having their own roof, so to speak, over their head, unless something radically is done by government. And I speak to government as an institution and not as the current administration. People who are cashiers, as already we have heard in this debate, people who are gas station service attendants, people who are security officers, many of those ranks, even some who are in the public service and are relatively well remunerated. The circumstances suggest that left on their own, they will never be able to have their own roof over their heads. And so radically, we need to embrace a shift in our thinking. Radically, we need to take on board a shift in the philosophy that guides our efforts to house our people in this country. So you provide at a very slow rate, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You were once at housing, and the majority of Barbados suffered that experience of the slow rate of pace at which they could access housing through NHC, except for the constituency of St. George North, I am informed. And having been so informed and not believing it myself.
Well, they had a good representative.
You were a very good representative, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's why repeatedly you are elected to the office which now you hold. And I was advised as to that, and I did not believe it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, knowing your good-naturedness and gentleness of spirit, until one day just after the crop commenced and the canes were down, and I could see beyond the canes, and I saw the number of units in places like Flat Rock. And then I realized what people were talking about. The rest of us in Barbados were not getting housing, but St. George North was. And I commend you for having...
But you have to remember that all politics is local.
All politics is local, you've always said. And I have to commend you for having found that strategic way of ensuring that you are elected election after election after election. I do not know what your successor's plans will be and what his approach will be, but I imagine shortly we will find out as you demit office, as I am also further advised,
Okay.
that we will have to have confirmed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we provide the units at a very slow rate of pace because we can't do otherwise. The money is not there. And then when we are able to provide, we are able to maintain the amenities associated with these units or the amenities on the ground. And so some of these housing areas, as we traditionally call them, have fallen into a state of disrepair and unsightliness. I love the vision espoused by the Honourable Prime Minister, and I think enshrined in the Constitution of the Barbados, of a party with which I am somewhat familiar. And I love the vision for addressing the situation of overcrowding in traditional developments like the Pine, St. Michael Southeast. Really something, in fact, needs to be done. Some of these housing developments have been there for a long time, in Deacon's Farm and in Grisettes, and like I said, in the Pine and in Bayland or Bayville. And it really represents an era of housing people that this country must long have passed behind. So the slow rate of pace, the inability to supply at a faster rate, and then the inability to maintain these units suggests that a different approach has to be taken to the business, to the problem of housing in Barbados. It has had implications for rents and the rental sector in Barbados, both with respect to costs and with respect to the quality of housing. We have seen the phenomenon arise among us of the slumlord in Barbados. I don't know if you're familiar with that in rural Barbados, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but we are familiar with that in urban Barbados. I know parts of St. Michael West, urban Barbados, are very familiar to you, Mr. Speaker, and that constituents, some of whom reside in those areas, benefit substantially from your presence and your kindness, and we appreciate that very much so. But the problem is we have an issue with the rental sector in Barbados and landlord-tenant relations in Barbados. And all of this is the outflow from the incapacity of government to provide at the rate, to maintain at the quality, and also to ensure that when we establish housing development, we in fact are building communities. I will support this resolution, of course. I have always said, and I say again, I believe St. Lucie is the next frontier for housing development in Barbados. St. Lucie, I believe, is also the next frontier for some measure of industrial development in Barbados. I do not know what the Honourable, the plans are of the now current Honourable Member for St. Lucie, but I would suggest whatever those plans are, he should be fast to the task, because there's a party now called the People's Party. And I would suggest that the Honourable Member be fast to the task of addressing that fact that St. Lucie is the next frontier for housing development and perhaps the next frontier for some measure of industrial development. I very strongly believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that it can help the cause of government and help the cause of working class Barbadians if government would pay more attention to providing the land and letting that historical, traditional impetus that is nascent, inherent to Barbadians, that impulse to build. I believe that there are some of us here who would have come up in a Barbados where our parents did not have a lot financially, did not necessarily have the wherewithal, but they built, Mr. Deputy Speaker, piece by piece, bit by bit, because they happened to be fortunate enough to get a spot on which to build. And I believe some mechanism can be found for giving a greater measure of priority to conveying land to individuals under whatever terms are prudent and mutually beneficial both to the state and to residents of Barbados, to ensure that they have that start, the property, the land on which they can now perhaps build, rather than rely on government to provide land and then still build the unit, or have to go necessarily to private developers who are in the business for making profit. I believe that a mechanism can be found to involve individuals, Mr. Deputy Speaker, like yourself, who may have an inclination to get into the business of investing in housing a little bit, maybe single unit or 2 or 3 units if you have the means. I'm not talking about developers like my honourable friend from Christchurch West. He is into large-scale developments of million-dollar units. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about individuals, lesser mortals financially, like yourself, who may have an inclination to build a unit or 2, no more than that, but you don't have the land. And if you have to go out and purchase the land, acquire the land, then it carries up the cost. But maybe a mechanism could be found for partnership with the state that puts the land into the mix, either under yourself as the investor or under the occupant who benefits from the project, and then the house can be built by yourself as the investor. And I believe that these things are not beyond imagination. They're not beyond the realm of our being able as a country, even with today's financial constraints and IMF stipulations notwithstanding, so to do. I believe that this is possible. And then you have non-state actors, you have non-governmental organizations, you have social agencies like the church, and there are some churches that have the wherewithal, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to do this. And I believe that there can be found scope and a mechanism for the government, the state, engaging 1 or 2 of those churches that have the means to do so, to build 1 or 2 units under some kind of specially arranged program. And I'm sure that there are willing hands which would be readily set to that task. I'm sure that there are open minds to that type of engagement. And I'm sure that there are warm hearts that will happily embrace participation, the chance to participate in such an initiative. If we continue down this road where we feel government must get the land, put the unit on it, then maintain it, or what have you, we will never get it done. And we are compounding a problem already existing in Barbados, where lack of housing is creating other social dynamics in Barbados which are undesirable. And that is simply what I would want to suggest. Just to put up units is not sufficient. Mr. Deputy Speaker, like I said, we need to think more about building communities. We can't create, we need to create wholesome communities where healthy family life can develop. The honourable member, brilliant mind as he is, from St. Michael's South, spoke to the social capital, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Social capital which exists at the level of our communities that is of high worth And we've got to make sure that we can build on that which already exists. And we got to stop the drain of that which we are already losing in terms of our social capital existing at the community level. And we've got to build wholesome communities, not just build a development. Both the Honourable Member for St. Michael South and the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central struck this note, and I agree with them wholeheartedly. Build communities that conduce to healthy family life in Barbados. If we fail to do that, we've not only failed to provide people with housing, but we failed to facilitate the development of that institution in Barbados, which is basic to the good order of society, and that is the institution of the family. So when we build, it must be with a view in mind, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of facilitating wholesome family life. We have, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to ensure that these communities are places where children can live and where children can learn, because a lot of the learning takes place outside the walls of the 9 to 3 or 8:30 to 2:30 schools or whatever the times might be. And these must be places where children and young people can live and learn, and where they can play, and of which they can be proud. If I develop a housing development at the Pine, we want people who live there to be able to proudly stand and say, I am from the Pine. Right now, we have a situation in Barbados where certain social negatives have stigmatized some of these communities: Haynesville, Silver Hill, Pine, Deacon's Farm. These things are true, unfortunately so. And part of what has contributed to this, it is the philosophy that has guided in the first place the types of developments that we have structured, configured, and erected. And therefore, I make a strong and impassioned plea that we see that revision in our philosophy, that we have that renewal in our thinking, and that we understand we have to be more strategic, and that we embrace the view that that philosophy must change, that we don't only provide housing, but we build communities. And the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central expressed that in details. Don't have to go through all of that. You have to make sure you take on board security considerations, the aesthetics of the situation, sanitation and sewage. All of those physical infrastructural things are important. One other key element which he perhaps did not mention is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when you build these communities, you've got to ensure that you build in mechanisms for economic opportunity in these developments. A lot of income can be earned at home these days. A lot of income can be earned right in your community these days. You don't have to leave to go to a job. But if the community is not configured for that, and if the policies governing life in those housing developments do not take on board the view that economic opportunity ought to be a consideration, then we will continue, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to miss the mark. I didn't plan to take this long in speaking, but I simply wanted to offer my sympathies to the family of the young man who lost his life, the entire family. I wanted to express my empathy to the Honourable Member for the Pine, for St. Michael South East, and the general community of the Pine. But I did also want to make that point that we have philosophically to undergo a change and see that our calling is to build communities and not provide simply housing, and that even when we get down to that level where we want to provide to housing and property, perhaps greater urgency should attach to providing the land under whatever mechanisms, that we need to be more strategic, less ad hoc in our approach to this business, because at the end of the day, it is about food and shelter and security, which are basic to the quality of life for any community, any family, any country. And I thank you, sir.
I'm obliged. Member for Christ for St. James South.
I rise to add my voice to those of my colleagues in addressing this resolution that is currently before the House. And the issue of our overall housing policy is one that is of concern to the Barbados Labour Party administration. For we know that there are hundreds of families in Barbados in urgent need of homes, in urgent need of housing, and we know that there are thousands of young Barbadians who are aspiring to be able to own their own home. But we are caught in a situation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where the availability of homes in the price range that people can afford simply is not there. And it presents a real challenge to us as a government, but not an insurmountable one, because with innovation, creativity, hard work, your eye on the ball as to the priorities that are to be put on the front burner in our society will keep us on target to ensure that we begin to wrestle the problem of the provision of housing to the ground. And I believe that it is more than just a public sector activity. It has to do with public and private sector, and it also has to do with assisting individuals and empowering them to be in a position to be able to provide their own homes for themselves and their families. So it's a big challenge that we have in front of us. In St. James South, I have both working class and middle class families that are in urgent need of housing. Many young people who have graduated, may be seeking a job, may not be able to attract the job that they want, and they're unable to afford housing, and very often end up staying within the family home with their parents when they long for the independence and the pride and the opportunity to have something of their own, to turn their own key. And so I hear these frustrations when I walk in the middle class environment. In the working class environments, it is even more acute, Mr. Deputy Speaker. At times it is heart-wrenching because the unemployment and the prolonged economic squeeze has resulted in people finding it really difficult to pay their rent. And many landlords have tried to be able to give people a little ease, but they can't do it forever. And so many young people now are finding that they are out on the street because they cannot afford the rental. And so the program that our government will bring is going to be an overall comprehensive program. Part of that is what we're dealing with right now. First, seeking to acquire the land so that we have available to us land that can be put into housing. So the 9 acres at Colleton, St. Lucie, and I'm very happy for my honourable colleague, the MP for St. Lucie, to have these 9 acres and to look forward to housing. He says he would like to get at least 80% of the housing. I would have to beg for 3%. And see if I can get some housing for some of my people as well. But I'm really very glad for him that that land is available. The challenge, however, is going to be how are we going to find affordable housing that people can pay for? How are we going to design, build, use different materials to come up with something that will fit into the salary ranges of the people who are in urgent need of housing? And it was listed off today, the various categories that would be in need. We talked about the gas station attendants, the cashiers, the people, the bus drivers. We talked about the security guards. Then you have teachers and police officers, a whole slew of people who are in urgent need of housing, and how can we make that affordable? And that's an ongoing job for this administration. One of the things that is top of mind for Prime Minister is the issue of housing. Not just the availability, but the resilience of our housing as well. One of the concerns for her is this very hurricane season putting our current housing stock at risk. The need for us to look at hardening our homes so that they're more hurricane resilient, so we can avoid the disaster that Dominica would have gone through. So there is a lot that needs to be done and a lot of creative work that needs to ensue in order for us to begin to properly tackle the issue of housing, getting the land, making it affordable. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this 9 acres that we're speaking about here, as I said, is just one piece, one part of the puzzle that will take us forward. The other piece that the Ministry of Housing and the National Housing has been working on is the whole issue of what is happening within the government housing units. I was very pleased to be invited by the National Housing Corporation and the Ministry of Housing to come into the Haynesville area because they wanted to assess how they were going to deal with the persons who were eligible for the 20-year housing, to be able to look at the condition of the houses, the extensions, the wells, the common areas, etc. And we walked the length and breadth of the community, going place to place, talking with the residents, hearing the concerns, hearing the difficulties. And these have been listed by my colleagues. You have issues of overcrowding. You have the issue of the wells, windows, doors, repairs, and the evictions. But the main challenge on the mind of many Haynesvillians are the electricals. We have been speaking about this now for quite a while, that the electricity has deteriorated to such a point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we've had 4 or 5 house fires and 6 families would have lost their property, all that they work for. Now, it's important to understand, when you're renting a house, the only thing that belongs to you in there are the possessions that you've worked for, that you went down to courts and you trust, as the old people would say. And bit by bit, you paid it off and accumulated some possessions that helped to make you feel comfortable, that helped to meet the needs of your family. And just the spark from a faulty piece of wiring puts it all up in smoke, and you lose everything. It is heart-wrenching. And therefore, one of the things that I am looking forward to is when the Ministry of Housing and National Housing start the electrical program that we need both in the Pine and in Haynesville. It means a lot to those residents. And why would it mean a lot to them? Yes, everybody wants their house repaired. Everybody wants the leaking stop. Everybody wants the wells sorted out. Everybody wants to get the repairs done to the doors, etc. But for me, I see beyond that, that it creates an opportunity for us to achieve a particular economic objective which we have as a government. Because if we can identify people in the community who could be given the work to do the repairs, to do the wells, to do the electricals, to help make the changes that help to beautify the environment, then what we would be doing is involving the community in its own upliftment. We would be creating an environment in which people can earn money. We'll be creating an environment in which people can feel worthwhile, that they can come from off the blocks, they can come from out of their homes and take back up the skills that this country provided them with by sending them to the Polytechnic, by sending them to the Vocational Training Board, or the schools that they've been to where they've been taught a trade. It will give us an opportunity to give them hope, that there's something to look forward to, and to be able to stand back and see their handiwork every single day and know that I repaired that, I fixed that, I was a workman on that, to have a sense of pride in their community. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for me as a parliamentary representative working in my constituency, one of the things I want to see happen is transformation. And transformation can be a slow process, but transformation will not come by words. It will not come through talk. It will not come through wishing and hoping. It is really when you have opportunities like this for the repair of wells, electricals, doors, and so on, that a government can take the opportunity of this work to do a number of things. One, they can do remedial training with persons who maybe have had the skills but they haven't done it for a long time, or maybe there are new methods that have emerged. It's a wonderful opportunity to retrain them in new techniques, new standards, and use those within the rebuilding and refurbishing of the housing units. It is also an opportunity to do something else. One of the things that needs to return to Barbados is the spirit of volunteerism. And Prime Minister has spoken about this repeatedly, that we have to come back to a place where the community understands it has a responsibility to itself to come together and do things for each other, with each other, to help to uplift our nation. And that is why she had identified in education that there would be a give back program with the university students who get their free education, that they should be able to give back into the community. As an MP, I want to restore that at the community level. That if we can have a situation, that's why I'm so looking forward to the changes with the electrical program and so on, that if we can have a program where the people in the area with the skills get that work, and then because they've had the opportunity to get that work, that they too can commit community hours. That if each of them made a commitment of 10 community hours, that we could use those community hours to do things for the residents in the community. Barbados is an aging society, and many of those units have elderly people in them. People who are no longer able to lift, hammer, move, dig, paint, things that they took for granted when they were at the height of their youth. Now that they're older, it is so much more difficult for them to do. I remember how when people needed to go to get some water, some of the elderly did not have anyone to get it for them, and they couldn't manage it themselves. It would have taken the community to sort that out. And so what I want to do is to have a program where when people are able to get work from government, they can then commit time to their communities and start that spirit of volunteerism. What I'm hoping is that it would so inspire them and feel so good doing something for their neighbor, a neighbor that they've grown up around, that that neighbor could call on them on another occasion, not because they're giving back hours because we ask it of them, but because they recognize, you know something, I could always go and do that for Miss Slater. The third thing that I would like to see come out of the electrical and the wells and repair program for the housing units would be, you have the work, you have the volunteerism, but I would want to mobilize the constituency around a common objective, that they start to purchase goods and services from each other in that community, so that as they earn money, they are able to take that money and spend it with their neighbor. Maybe the neighbor offers a service Maybe they sell food. Maybe they do vegetables. Maybe they're a handy person, and they can use their skills to do work in the community. And I believe that if we can take the opportunities provided by these repair programs and use it to focus the community on a specific set of values, that we will start to rebuild good working communities, that we will be able to help people live a satisfying life, and that people can have a hope for their dreams. One of the issues that must accompany any housing program that we would want to pursue, and Prime Minister is very conscious of this. She preaches it to us every time we meet. The absolute need for economic growth. Because even if we were to find funding to provide housing, unless people have money to pay for it, then that housing program can go nowhere. Therefore, hand in hand must come the housing program with economic growth. So what is happening at the moment is that we are working assiduously on identifying opportunities for that economic growth, because that growth will bring the job opportunities that we need. No doubt everyone heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central when she shared on television about the plan for the whole redevelopment of Bridgetown. Plenty of opportunities for jobs there. Everybody is aware of the program put on by the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, where he has launched the feed program, where people can get involved in agriculture. The government is also pursuing at this time other opportunities to enfranchise workers to be a part of whatever growth and development is happening in Barbados. And one of the things that we are doing in our ministry is looking out for the potential new trade opportunities, identifying countries that have potential for trade and business, and to be able to build the necessary foreign affairs relationships with them and begin to lay the foundation for us to engage in trade. All of this will start to bring the economic growth, and that growth will result in jobs, and those jobs will allow people to have the opportunity to be able to afford homes. So these are some of the things that we need to do. In any housing program, because as I've spoken with people, they've sat in front of me, they've shared their particular difficulties, and indeed there are certain common threads that run through their challenges. One, many people, they don't have high-paying jobs. Because of the economic circumstances they find themselves in, their savings have been depleted. And so being able to find that deposit is a challenge. For many people, being able to pay more than $600 or $800 is also a challenge per month. So many ask me, how would they be able to afford, if they cannot get a government unit where they can pay $55 a week, how are they going to be able to afford housing in the private sector? And this is where we have to sit with our constituents and begin to develop programs as to how we're going to help them to go forward. In my discussions with my constituents, I often share with them that there may be a number of things that we have to do. One, a person may need to expand their income. And this is where people buying from each other is important. I ask them, is there a skill that you have? Are there resources at your disposal that you could convert into income-generating activities? Can you bake something? Can you do something? Is there anything extra you feel you can do that your community needs that you'll be able to sell to that community? And can you then begin a positive saving program that you can begin to put that money aside towards getting your own home? One of the things I feel needs to be put into any government program in relation to housing and to making it affordable. Many years back, we used to have the 100% mortgages program. And that used to be very, very helpful to people who did not have the 10% deposit to put down on a home. But it made it possible for them to be part of the home owning group. Then the other program was the rent-to-own programs. Those two are very, very useful to people to be able to get that opportunity to be able to start their own home. One of the things that we need to emphasize among people is the use of cooperatives. Now, cooperatives in Barbados, we have some, and some are very strong. But there are cooperatives in other parts of the world that go beyond the savings program. I know that some of our cooperatives here have started little housing programs. They do help with mortgages and so on. But overseas, you find that they would have a housing cooperative, or they would have some type of business cooperative, a cooperative dedicated to some particular activity that was critical to its members. And certainly in the area of housing, we could form a housing cooperative that can begin to pool monies together, pool synergies together, and be able to negotiate for a program. We can do self-help programs. Barbadians are so accustomed to this. Others have mentioned it, that if they're able to get the land, they will work and work until they build little by little, working on weekends. Some people build their own homes because they may be very handy. They may have a brother or sister who would be able to help them. I remember one of my constituents in West Terrace. I pass once a week and I would see the progress that he was making. It took him some time. It took him more than a year, but he was able to eventually complete his home because he did some self-help. And I think that we can begin to encourage people to do this. Another thing that I've been seeking to encourage my constituents to do, quite a few of them, a lot of people feel that people who live in the urban corridor are not interested in agriculture, but let me tell you, I have a team that wants to do agriculture badly. They want to do agriculture. So I'm going to be having some discussions with the Honourable Member for St. Philip South about getting my people into agriculture. Now, what some people don't realize is that Barbados is not self-sufficient in poultry, although we do a lot of it. And therefore, there's a lot of room to grow poultry that you can earn money. And that's how old people used to build their homes. They would raise pigs. They would raise chickens. They would put that money aside. And that money would bank up, bank up, bank up, bank up. And as fast as they would say, catch their hand, they would call in the mason, call in the carpenter, buy a few supplies, get part of it done, and little by little, they would do it. And sometimes I've heard of families where people built 2 and 3 homes using that method and not having a mortgage. And these would be ordinary, everyday citizens in ordinary jobs that may not be paying a lot, but they find creative ways to find that money and to be able to come up with a plan. The last thing I usually say to my constituents when we're trying to discuss alternatives for housing, I keep trying to point out that good relationships are important for housing. That when you live together in a home, if people do not build positive and good relations, and tensions break out, and those stresses get out of hand, this is where somebody has to ask somebody to leave, or the police have to come and put somebody out, or someone is so miserable, so unhappy in the circumstances, they're forced to leave and put up with whatever conditions they find outside of their home because they just find the conditions within the house intolerable. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, good relationships are critical for success in life. Whether it's getting a job, keeping a job, getting a home, keeping a home, getting a family, keeping a family together. You need it for success. And one of the things I try to point out to people is that when we are going to live in community together, there will be certain rules that have to obtain. In other words, we cannot do as we like in a home that is overcrowded. You can't be selfish. You cannot be inconsiderate in the use of the resources. You have to be thoughtful of others. You have to respect other people's property. And very often, sometimes when you listen to the stories of why some people end up being evicted from their family home, sometimes it is because the relationships have become very, very strained. So one of the things that I want to encourage us to do, I think if Barbadians are going to have a successful future, we have to be able to do things together. And we have to be able to pool resources to improve our circumstances. One of the conditions that I've found sometimes with some families, the parents may own the home. It might be an elderly pensioner. There may be several adult children in the home, living in the home, but nobody wants to repair anything. Nobody wants to take their money and put in the house because they say the house is not theirs. But my position is, but you live there. This is where you live. And therefore you need to contribute to the maintenance of that home. So I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that if we could help Barbadians to change their thinking, if we can get them to change their social relations, they could better weather the storm and better weather their housing crisis if they can at least build good relations and pool monies together to take the family forward. And I would want to commend this to them. And to the Honourable Member from the Ministry of Housing, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, and the Honourable Member for St. John, I would want to say to them how I'm looking forward to the electrical program. I'm very pleased to hear that it will be on the road shortly. And I look forward to walking with the Honourable Member from St. Andrew into the constituency to make that announcement to the good people of Haynesville that they can look forward to their electricals, they can look forward to wells being repaired, and they can look forward to the transfer of the houses into their name as soon as they are able to sort out all the legal requirements. So I want to thank him in advance, and I look forward to connecting to him on this matter shortly. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
You're welcome. Member for St. Michael East.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I know that the genesis of this debate starts with a resolution related to the acquisition of land in St. Lucie, the vesting of land to the government in St. Lucie, private property going to the state for the purpose of housing. But it also coincides with a very sensitive, and probably it's better to say emotional, subject that is not even a subtopic, so to speak, in the circumstances that there's a young man who, unfortunately, he lost his life because of neglect by the state. And neglect don't necessarily mean that it occurred yesterday or day before, but neglect of the state where any balanced and serious individual would know that the conditions existed even before our time. I don't want to carry the debate down that line because sometimes it is difficult to fully explain it to anybody who is a malcontent or anybody who chooses to misrepresent what you say, as long as you say something, even if you don't even touch on the subject matter. So I feel that it is still important that the government of the day demonstrate to the people of Barbados, and more in particular to the people of the Pine, how much we share the sorrow of the parents, relatives, the entire community of the Pine, how much this matter in a very sensitive way touch on the conscience of all of us as parliamentarians, especially persons who were born in similar circumstances, and those who had the privilege. It's a privilege because you become more humane to socialize in the environments like the people in the Pine, like the people in Licorice Village, where the Honourable member for St. Michael's South indicated that he was socialized in those kinds of environment, from poverty to poverty, as though it is going to be persistent poverty. And what we are struggling with today is how can we find that ethical neutrality that allows us to balance economic development and also social development. How do we find that balance? And we have to be always conscious that we have a responsibility. All of us ought to. I can't say all of us do, but all of us ought to, because we'll be betraying the trust that these poor people vested in us. All of us came here not as a result, especially if the numerical strength is the calculation that is normally used in order to determine who return here to Parliament. We come to Parliament as parliamentary representatives to represent the interests mainly of the majority, because the majority, it so happens that the majority in almost every society are the people on the rims of that society who are experiencing all of these social hardships out of a political system that is a liberal political system, only concentrating in the private sector on profit, inserting provisions in their philosophy that there's corporate responsibility and that there's a social conscience. But there are some of us also that are shaped by that philosophy. And we can't believe that we're making progress unless we have capital development and not necessarily human capital development. And the history is very clear. For those who abandoned the human capital development over the years, we saw nothing but suffering in all different forms. And I keep saying almost monotonously that these governments, with these physiologs, with these kind of pigmentations or shades, but all with a commonality of pigmentation, have a duty to do all that we can to make sure things like this don't continue to occur and cause harm to poor people. The Honourable member for St. Michael's South indicate Licorice Village, a community to which I represent. And a community, as he indicated, he was, in those early days of his life, up to the point when he was still an adolescent, he was still molded by all the social practices, the economic forms of deprivation that existed inside those communities. We know what it is. Somebody's to fall in a pit. How long things like this would continue? Certainly not in perpetuity. There are still people in our communities who are landless people as well, and who are also homeless, and some living in shelters that you certainly cannot qualify them as homes, with no pits or no wells at all. I know a resident in my community who have to squat and defecate over a hole. And from time to time, you have to hold the children's hands so they will not fall into these pits. So I want us to begin to apply ourselves to what is. It is fundamental that we understand what is in this society. That poor people must be at the center of development for any government that has a social conscience. And just like you love the Lord's Prayer, just like you love going to church on Sunday and praising the Lord, you have a commitment to yourself to do all that you can to eradicate all of these social and economic ills that impact our poor people. If this government is off track, then it has to get back on track. Because one of the things that I remember clearly before 2008 is that the then Prime Minister never stopped saying, I am here to stop poor people from being poor. Poverty and landlessness, poverty and homelessness, poverty and ignorance, poverty and ill health. And a conscious effort was made. It might not be a balance that gives us equality, but it was a journey towards arriving at equality. And that really constitutes the philosophy that must continue in a modern form of governance in a colony which has been stripped of all that it has and now got to go begging arms for assistance in order to allow all people to enjoy a good quality of life. It is because others that were here never respect any form of philosophy to guide them. They have never had any clear objectives. They tried functioning on arithmetic and could not get it done. The philosophy itself must always say this trajectory is that we are on our journey so that our people tomorrow can enjoy a better quality of life than they enjoyed when they became at first captives and were enslaved. But that is our mission. That is the mission that the forefathers gave us. That is the mission that the forefathers sacrificed their lives even in circumstances when they know they could not win. But that's what Buster did. And you hear me say these things from time to time. That's what he did. He's not a foolish man. He went in a battle knowing that the people had supreme weaponry. He knew what was in the harbor. He knew the militia was around. But he said things must change. I might not come out alive, but I'm going to break the back of the hegemonic practices of the time. And that's what he did. He broke the back. We broke the back again in the 30s. And these are historic junctures that we must reflect on at times like these. It is not because the Honourable Member for South East was negligent, it is not because she is not Mary, that like any other human being, she is vulnerable and had challenges and cannot be around at this specific time. Because even if she was around, with the state rate of all its resources over the last 10 years, with all the demands on the state, like any ordinary human being, if you're broke, you're broke. You would like to do things for your children. You would like to do things for yourself. You would like to improve the shingles on top of the roof. You would like to take off the asbestos on top of the houses. You would like to dig a pit. You would like to have waterborne facilities, but you're broke. We inherit a rape treasury. This is not 2008, when the then Prime Minister underneath the Barbados Labour Party was talking to us about how many $1 billion we had in foreign reserves. This is not a time in 2008 when we were here talking about 6.5% unemployment and we were discussing something called, how much it was? $18 billion in what? Man, you sound like you're talking about money from out of India. Huh? We had so much money. We had so $1.8 billion, close to $2 billion. That sounds like rupees and that kind of dollars. Huh? That's the kind of result for reserves.
2.8.
We had that kind of money.
2.8 billion. 2.8.
2.8 billion. You see, I underestimating it still sound mammoth. If it is that size, 2.8 billion, ask these people what they left here. Now we are faced with the challenges of the representative of Haynesville, another housing community, who happened to be the person who saved Barbados from Al Capone. Al Capone. Right? We are here studying how can we do all that we can with no funds and very limited funds to see how we can stop the units belonging to the government from burning in places like Haynesville, and obviously the Pine and the Ivy and Deacons, Fernyhurst, the Farm, all over Grisette. These are housing developments with people living in rooms extremely small with some massive families living in there. People sleeping in bunk beds. So when we feel passionate about these things, there are other people who disconnect. Because this is values versus facts now. The reality is, this is what we know, what we experience. But there are other people who derive their thoughts from values. They've got a view. When they see you, if you enter into a conversation to them about your house, and they come at you, and they see you with something like 4 by 6, and the kitchen, and the toilet, you don't even know these names, dining room and drawing room and things. You know how long it takes me before I found the difference between dining room and the drawing room? These people got patios and all kinds of strange things. These people cannot understand why poor people experience these challenges because they don't see a challenge. They live in total isolation of the realities in the housing districts. They already stigmatized the housing districts. That is why I don't use certain words when it comes to my old people, because I know the psychological harm that has been done deliberately by those people who believe that they're linguists and they know language better than anybody else. They call us all kinds of things. I told you all that already. Squatters, imbeciles, every kind of negative thing that we hear. I know how these people feel. I know This is no theatrics, I know. I have seen people talk real pretty and treat poor people bad. But they know the jargon well, so when they begin to talk about the challenges that poor people face and think, oh, but these people never eat a cheese cutter yet. Never. They don't care about anybody in here. Even though you're an MP and a minister, you cannot enjoy the privileges in this society like some people who only peep through the school doors of Barbados. Some of them went to Queens and Harrison, went there for 2 weeks. And then came out and become managers. So you can't ask corporate Barbados. I'm not a dreamer who got interest not only at the parochial level, but outside of Barbados and got to repatriate funds back to the 62 children and grandchildren out there. We got to do what we are supposed to do. And we have been doing it from the birth of the institution. And this party at no time cannot go off track. I'm not going to, I mean, the reality is clear. You see all that happened prior to the last election. I don't have to put judgment on that. The people are not backward. People do not do it because they love me. People do it because they knew that they were suffering and dying because of the maladministration of that party. And the consequence of that is called worn down. The consequence of that is blame. And the fact that a member of parliament for the first time in the history of Barbados up there trying to push up a defense saying, all of us do it down here. That's where we are. And because others are not standing in the dock, he is not the only one. He is not the only one. And the people judge that, and they put us here. This is not a cosmetic exercise. This is not a ceremony for flaunting personalities. People expect us to be able to address these issues. We have to come straight and tell the people, look, we were broke and we are still broke and we are still coming out of this. But as soon, and we're going to, and you see where we are now, because historic social and economic conditions shape the ideas that I have. And it should shape the ideas. They don't just go on high. Even if it's an economic theory or social theory that you like, the present social and economic conditions must shape what we do. And if we have a priority, of today that need to be addressed today or even yesterday, it ought to be addressed yesterday, we have to do all that we have to make sure we address it. All of the wells across Barbados, don't care how difficult it is. So it's not only about fixing wells in the Pine, you know. It's about fixing the wells wherever poor people live. The other people can fix wells for themselves. Nothing to do with being contemptuous. They can fix wells for themselves. So there are communities that we're telling people, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and the people don't have boots. You're telling people, build houses. I hear a comment today too, that you try to tell people to do things. They cannot do it. There's unemployment and there's underemployment. There's high cost of living. These are challenges. We got to be martyred men in the circumstances and rescue the people. And if we have to shift the investments, the capital investments, let people be the center focus of the program. There are many things that we never saw before, but what we knew is that we felt some sense of happiness and we were still living at a high quality of life. Therefore, we were able to tell the world we now have men living to 76 and years old, our average. We can say that in the 1930s. We can say it. So we made progress over the years. We can't now allow the circumstances to be retarded or retreated in any way. So we have to rescue it. If it means that, I know in our manifesto we say there's a mission critical program, this has to go into mission critical. This effort has to go into mission critical. We did not have the issue staring us in our face. It is now a glare on. And it now puts an MP who going through all the challenges of life and people who made up of stone and concrete conscience talking nonsense without the brain getting into gear. She has to. I know it because I went through it. You have to. If you're sick, you're sick. When you begin to feel better, you will do your work. And we have to be here for her and the people of Southeast. If she is not here, then every MP across this country must adopt St. Michael's Southeast as their constituency and try to help. I want to assure the people in the Pine. I've spent some time in the Pine. I was I don't know what kind of resident you would describe me as, but I am not a passing through. I know about sleeping in the Ivy housing area. I know about sleeping in the Pine housing area as well. And I slept with my family on all the occasions. Sir?
This is not confession time.
Sir, the reality is...
You don't have to confess.
The reality is, I have a small housing area in St. Barnabas. I have a small housing area, but the Ivy is a little bigger, but certainly not as big as the Pine, Ferniehurst, or the Farm, or Deacons, and those areas, Silver Hill, and those areas. But we would be missing an important opportunity that open up a space for the unworthy to be able to capitalize and abuse the moment by trying to make it look as though this is a heartless government. This is a man that is like a man owned the house for 100 years. And somebody passed with a car and the house collapsed. All of a sudden you're blaming. Only if you have a brain that don't have any powers of analysis, you will conclude that the man with the car passed and that's why the house collapsed. The house they owned for 100 years. These people left slabs broken. These people shift the responsibility which they had in order to win an election to the people, to the poor people. Tell them that you can own these houses. And everybody felt good because they wanted to own a house, a piece of the land. Everybody wanted peace. But then they had no more responsibility to maintain anything. So you had one house, you had 6 and 7 units to one community well. They never could get the matter solved. They can never give the people the deeds, the title deeds. So people live every day in limbo with something called letters of intent. They can't sell it, they can't mortgage it, they can't insure it, because they have nothing legal to show that the units belong to them. Therefore, the NAC shifting from the socialist agenda to what is called neoliberalism, but that is so much a pleasant word for such behavior, that kind of cruelty, that people was left with overflowing toilets, wells with broken concrete slabs, electrical installations burning or running people out the houses, plumbing bad. You had to then take up the responsibility in the middle of unemployment, in the middle of underemployment, now to provide all these services for yourself. There must be an opportunity cost. But you really end up with equivalent to nothing if you can't maintain the unit and if you don't even own it. And then the NHC had no money to go in and do anything. And then they construct houses, allow contractors to inflate the cost of the houses, and then whoever's the mathematicians end up charging people for units. That certainly could not be for low-income people. So you end up with Valerie, you end up with the Grotto, a confused housing policy for low-income people, and low-income people can't get the houses. And when you put somebody in the house because you want to win the next election, then after the body pay the first month rent, the body can't pay anymore, and then you come back and tell the entire society 60 to 70% of the tenants in the housing units cannot pay, and then you start putting them out and disgracing them on the street. Mr. Deputy Chairman, this is really the most heartbreaking thing that has happened since we went back. It is for me, because an innocent youngster who I'm told by the narrative he was going to get a roadie, never knew that his life would be gone in a couple seconds. The whole community empathized and felt the pain of that young man. And it's something that has reverberated across the entire landscape of Barbados itself. And I think that we have to give anything that is humanly possible. Anything. We cannot give back life, but what we could do is save others in the circumstances. No other person, look, in this year, we had, I think, about 2 other cases that I know about, persons who fell in wells. I know what I'm talking about. So we have to give people that comfort that the state understands that is their responsibility. Because those who are hiding, those who ignore those things because...
I remember you have 3 more minutes to win up.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair. Because it is not part of their values. They're not interested in those things. There are certain people in this country that you could go to jail for 1,000 years for stealing. My God, man was in jail for over 10 years on remand. You could understand a class of society that could have a man in a jail, no more than 1,000 people in prison in Barbados. And you have a system that kept a man in prison for 10 years. You got cooks up there, officers up there, magistrates, clerks, all kind of information technology programs that everybody else talking about, how we can keep the records. This is the most efficient new model that we have. You got a model that's so efficient that for 365 days for 10 years, you don't know that man in jail, that shimmy in jail. And then you hear people saying that there's a whole backlog that we now have to release them. But if you live in a society of that kind, then you know that people are inhumane. Intelligent people, not even backward people, people who boast about a university and lots of secondary schools and all these professional people. Nobody knew that a man was in jail. The members of the family didn't know that he was in jail. The lawyers, the magistrate, the records, nothing showed that a man was in jail. So it says something about us, this cold disconnect that exists among our people, that a man can fall in a well and the subject matter could be everything else. But this man fell in a well under circumstances where the state of the time, not necessarily this government, the state of the time neglected. And now all this week you can see pictures of hundreds of wells across various estates in Barbados, and now the minister has to find a way of redeeming himself, the parliamentary representative for the community, and the state itself. I personally believe, and thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I personally believe that all of us must give the assurance, not just to the parliamentary representative and the minister, that we'll give them their full support, but ultimately we have to let the people know that this is a party of conscience. Its history clearly demonstrates it's a party of conscience. Grant Adams took up the mantle in this country, not just as the first leader, and debating about the premier who think that is academic nonsense, or it's still a colony, and debating that. Grant Adams took it up first. All the records show poverty was staring us. We see it again, poverty staring us, and still staring us. And the objective, one of the major objectives of this party must remain, we have to eradicate poverty, what other achievements we might make, we have to eradicate poverty. Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Member for Jamaica Northwest.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to display my support towards this resolution, the vesting of Crown lands to the National Housing Corporation for housing development. Sir, 9 acres of land for housing development will certainly touch the lives of 79 families across Barbados. The member for St. Andrew and the member for St. John, I wish to congratulate both of you for executing such a good deed for the people of Barbados. A move like this, sir, is a move any caring government would do for the poor people who can't afford properties that cost over $300,000 or $400,000 across Barbados. A move like this, sir, any caring government would do to reduce the number of people on the waiting list at the National Housing Corporation. Sir, we as a government, we are not here to bring housing solutions similar to the one up Coverley. We are not here, sir, to sell government lands to restaurant owners like the one in Orange Hill. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are here to govern and to make a positive difference in the lives of the people who we were placed to represent.
Here.
Can you imagine, sir, a government collecting over $24 billion between 2008 and 2018, left $400 million in the Treasury, but left the National Housing Corporation bankrupt? Can you imagine, sir, the National Housing Corporation being bankrupt, but still has to struggle to pay engineers $1.2 million to carry out work for the corporation? Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, sir, the National Housing Corporation being bankrupt, but still continue to struggle to pay land surveyors over $495,000 to survey housing units across Barbados? The demand for housing is high, sir, and the demand is higher than the supply that the National Housing Corporation presently can provide. And poor people across this country, sir, are suffering because they are living under inhumane conditions. And I know of families, sir, who are presently renting houses. Some of these houses, sir, are in very, very poor condition. Some of these houses, sir, are rotten to the core, Mr. Speaker, sir. Some of these houses has outdoor toilet facilities, sir. And some of these houses have, sir, outdoor toilet facilities where these facilities are exposed to the elements, Mr. Speaker, sir. And, sir, sometimes when I traverse not only my constituency but Barbados and see the condition that some of these people are living in, Mr. Speaker, sir, sometimes it brings back memories when I was a boy growing up in Brighton, Black Rock, St. Michael, sir. I grew up in a three-bedroom wooden house, and it wasn't the best, sir. And I had to go out in the yard to use a pig toilet, just like some of these families that I have came in contact with, sir. And I even had days of utilizing a pipe in the yard, sir, as a shower in order to take baths. And it's very disheartening, sir, to see that we still have families who are still living in such circumstances in 2019. Sir, it's very hurtful to see that. And similarly, like the member, sir, for St. John, I wish to add to his comments, and I do look forward to a similar resolution that will benefit the good people of St. Michael Northwest. And I can honestly say, that, sir, that we all want the best for ourselves. And I fully support this resolution because I want the best for the people I love and represent in the best constituency of St. Michael Northwest. And I surely hope, sir, that this housing development will benefit some of my constituents, especially the ones that wouldn't mind, living in the north under the present representative, sir. And I could honestly, sir, say, sir, that the ministers of housing are doing excellent work managing that corporation. And I was elated when both ministers and officials from the National Housing Corporation took the time out, sir, to tour Dickens Farm and Rosemont, Ferniehurst, Golden Acre, to really listen, sir, to the concerns of the tenants, to identify the tenants, sir, that will receive their conveyances under this government, to offer advice, sir, to those tenants who are thinking about extending their units, sir, and most of all, to address the issues that are presently affecting the tenants in some of these housing units within my constituency, sir. And I will continue to say, sir, it really took a government like the Barbados Labour Party government to lead by example, Mr. Speaker, sir, and for the two ministers of housing to really govern that corporation after 10 years of corruption and mismanagement, sir. And I want to urge both ministers of housing to utilize the Crown lands situated in the constituency of St. Michael Northwest, Mr. Speaker, sir, for housing development whenever funding become available for such to materialize, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I want to conclude by saying, sir, that I look forward to the day when some of the families within my constituency can embrace a piece of this rock and have some place to call home under this present government and the leadership of the member for St. Michael Northeast. I oblige to you, sir.
Member for St. Andrew.
In wrapping up this debate, I would like to thank those members who have spoken on this resolution. Being in these chambers for some time and seeing resolutions before this House, matters before this House, being dealt with in a manner which would prevent members from going far and wide, I would like to compliment you for allowing the latitude that you have given to members, especially saying that this resolution really dealt, or rather really deals with the vesting of property in the National Housing Corporation for housing purposes. But I believe that it would probably have been a miracle, taking into consideration the circumstances of the last week, if members did not actually comment on that horrific incident which has shocked this nation during the past few days. I know that members could be somewhat passionate about their constituency, but I particularly like, in looking at the contribution of members, the simple statement by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South. The Democratic Labour Party government, the last government, tricked the people of this country. And they didn't just trick the people of this country. I think that some of us in these chambers seem to have forgotten that we have only been here for a few months. The problems that we have encountered during the time that we were here during the last few months, is really beyond one's imagination. Certainly in the Ministry of Housing, the type of problems that we have seen. Not only in terms of the corruptive element of it, but in terms of the inefficiency, the incompetence, the type of directives that have been given to officers, good officers within the ministry. And this is why I stop short of actually blaming directly any particular government agency. And I think it is wrong when officers who work tirelessly and are being then requested to make certain decisions against their own professional competence and professional reputation, when they could sit down and listen and hear people actually being critical of them and their institution. And certainly as Minister of Housing, however animated we might be in terms of our own constituency, I certainly will not condone any attacks on the institution that I have become fairly closely connected to. The National Housing Corporation is not the same National Housing Corporation that we left in 2008. It is not the same National Housing Corporation that I knew way back in 1994 when I was first Minister of Housing. A lot of things certainly have changed, and changed drastically. You have situations where at the level of ministers, persons were put in houses and told not to pay rent. You have situations where at the level of ministers, persons were told to go in the open spaces, go and put your house there. They even told people exactly where to put their house. In terms of the problem now that confronts us with respect to that incident, you have situations. I was horrified when I went to did my tours, and I must say that I recognize, because of the problems which we heard about during the election campaign and by the candidates, I, together with the team from the ministry, because some of the same officers in the ministry, we had a series of meetings, and they were appalled by the directives which they were given by ministers during the past 10 years. The Prime Minister speaks of it as though it was the lost decade, and certainly it was. And it would have been impossible for us in that short space of time, within a year, to deal with the type of problems that we encountered on the 25th of May when we took office. Cognizant of the fact that there were problems, series of meetings, because it is not a wise thing simply to go in and say you're going to solve a problem without actually knowing exactly what you have to do. And I must say, I've been having a series of meetings, weekly meetings. We do tours of the various housing estates. Every single week, we do a different area. And I have seen, for the areas that we have visited, every single, I call it infraction, on the part of the last government. I believe that I have seen every single well in the Pine. Every single well in the Pine on those tours, because we stop, we take note. And the thing about it is that during our last tour, I don't know, I might have been a prophet, because I was trying as minister, and Minister Griffith could bear me out on this, to ensure that we finish those tours so that we would be able to get a report, an overall report. If I would say that there was any fault on our part, I record the chief wells inspector at the National Housing Corporation, knowing the difficulty that they had. I mean, there were other problems too, which only apply to the Pine, but I wouldn't really go into details, because I wouldn't like to sort of put any blame on the culture in the Pine. I mean, that is another matter. That is a matter that one faces in any society, especially when there is neglect, because if there's neglect, if there is negligence, if there is corruption at the level of ministerial level, it will permeate throughout the system. But if there's one thing that I must say, I remember the chief wells inspector telling me, sort of reporting that, let us do the report on the Pine, and let us see what we can do with respect to the Pine before we move on anywhere else. And to his credit, had we done that, not that we would have been able to avoid the problem that happened, what transpired last week, but maybe we probably would have been close to solving, or rather to starting to fix some of the problems that we saw. And you know, dealing with these stores, dealing with the way certainly how I like to do things. The incident happened on Thursday. I mean, and we attended to the matter almost immediately. The minister Griffith was on the scene within seconds. I must say that the atmosphere was somewhat volatile, but that is to be expected in circumstances like this. a youngster has lost his life in circumstances where it should not have happened. But fault cannot be placed on the part of the Ministry of Housing or the National Housing Corporation. These were problems which were there in 2018, 2019, that were not there 10, 11 years ago, that were not there in 1994, problems which mushroomed over a period of time. And one must also take into consideration the fact that because of the certain financial strictures, the National Housing Corporation was not in a position to do what it was supposed to do. I really don't want to go into the question of the financial position of the National Housing Corporation. As the parliamentary representative for St. Andrew, I know what the feeling of the member for St. Michael Southeast. St. Michael Southeast. I suffer her pain, and PAIN. But, I mean, we didn't have any deaths in Whitehill. We had no deaths in Whitehill. But the problems in Whitehill were graver than any other problem that I could think that faced any other ministry. But you see, it is one thing to say, well, this is only one well and we could have done it. But the type of the problems that the last government left, I think one must look at that, look at those problems. I mean, and no money to fix them. I mean, it is one thing to say, how can you go and fix one well in such a short space of time? A person dies and then you fix the well in a weekend. Why you didn't do it? But I mean, was that the only problem? You have to look at the problem that faced us on the 24th of May. South Coast sewage, millions and millions and millions of dollars. Remember for St. Michael East, of Christchurch East? I mean, I have seen him come into cabinet, to cabinet almost every week. I mean, and there's a different problem almost every week. Millions of dollars being spent. I mean, and the problems we had with South Coast sewage. And you come this week and you think you have it, and then you have to go back. You spend about $2 or $3 million, and then to no avail. You got to come back and go back again. I mean, the problems with public transport. Serious problems. I think the Minister of Transport, I don't know those of you who knew Minister of Transport at the time of elections, but he's lost about 100 pounds since then. I mean, you look at him. You look at him and you will see. You see the Minister of Michael East, the question of the garbage trucks. All of these are matters that could have been dealt with if the last administration had done what it was supposed to do. So we cannot come here, I know how we would feel about these matters. I know how I feel about Whitehill. I know how I feel like Whitehill. An entire community has been dislocated. And the fact remains that as I speak, even to the bottom of Whitehill, I mean, that area might disintegrate at any particular point in time. People can't leave their homes to go anywhere. I know the suffering of those people in Whitehill. People having to climb up little steps in order to go and catch a bus. You leave home at 12 o'clock in order to get somewhere at 6 o'clock. But nobody has died. Nobody has died. Maybe if somebody had died, we would have had the road fixed because the priority would have shifted. It is a question of your priorities. The priorities would have shifted. And in the case of the bell, it is not that was not a priority. It is that you can't have a plan to deal with one well. You have a plan to deal with an entire area. And then there are certain problems in certain certain matters pertaining to the housing estates. I mean, I touched on it with respect to what people were told. People building construction, massive constructions, 2-story buildings on wells. 2-story buildings on wells. I saw some things in the Pine that I never, ever thought was possible. It was something out of a movie. People come and complain to you, you thought they were. I mean, when people came and complained to me, I mean, because if you build your house, a 2-story house on a well, and then they start affecting the neighbor next door, obviously they would have to complain, and the type of complaints coming out of the Pine by persons who were affected I mean, you couldn't believe them. You had to go there. And that is why we do the tours every week. You have situations where certain matters had to be rectified. And National Housing actually went to the area and rectified those problems. And then within 2 tours of National Housing leaving, you get concrete being removed. Concrete being removed. I mean, there's serious problems. There's serious problems in the housing estates, and particularly in the Pine. I mean, and you can't just come and blame the National Housing Corporation, who has done its best under trying circumstances. The maintenance of the wells is a problem. The maintenance of the estates, it is a problem. And the thing about it is that there's no money coming in many respects. So if people are not paying rent, if government has left National Housing Corporation in a state where obviously it has to try to manage its resources, I mean, there's no resource to fix any single emergency. You can't just come and blame the National Housing Corporation. But you have to blame, I mean, the National Housing Corporation as of today. Blame the National Housing Corporation, but blame the last government for their failure to fix the problems. But, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that out of this, we would be able to have a meaningful change, some sort of transformation in the way things are done in these housing estates. As I said, the housing Pine is a very serious problem. The Prime Minister spoke about the planning gains. It is not a case where tomorrow you could actually, especially those houses those areas that are built on wells, that you could actually get those problems rectified. But in many cases, we may have to shift a number of those persons, or I would say the solution, the real solution to the problems in the Pine is one that we cannot do at this particular point in time. It would involve a complete relocation of about 50% of the residents in the Pine, so that we would then be able to do a proper inspection, to have a proper inspectorate. The regulations is another matter, because, I mean, the difficulty about it is that, let us say that we fix the problems in the Pine right now in these estates. I mean, governments change every 5 years. Governments change every 5 years. The dilemma that we face is that we might have all of the plans, all of the good intentions with respect to fixing the problems in the Pine. And we go in, I heard the minister talk about, I mean, the leader of the opposition talk about community relations supported by the honourable member for St. James South. All of these things, part of our manifesto. I don't know if the honourable member has read our manifesto since she went over there. But then, when you do all of these things, you take into consideration, you have a new area, you'll be able to define the area in the way that you want it to be. And then you bring a government of vagabonds 10 to 15 years from now, the type of vagabonds and the type of criminals that we've seen in the last 10 years. What do you expect? It's a dilemma that we face. It's a dilemma. And the thing about it is that we in the Barbados Labour Party, we saw the units, the units were the housing, the units, and there are certain developments that we put, low-income development, were put in place for the least vulnerable in our society in terms of affordability. And it was meant, there was supposed to be a graduation. You go, you rent a unit, and there's a graduation. We put a number of things, a number of housing solutions in place. People say we started a land bank and then we didn't build anything. We didn't complete the land bank, and we didn't build on all the land that we spoke about. I don't know what the honourable member for St. Michael West spoke about when he talked about more land, but you have to give the people land. Well, all of this is part of the manifesto, and that is all part of the planning of the Barbados Labour Party government in the past and in the present. The Prime Minister speaks about the housing gains. You weren't listening to the Prime Minister when she was speaking about that. All of these things, we could do all of the solid and the sound planning that some members speak about that we can do. But then what is going to happen? What is going to happen 10, 15 years down the road, Mr. Speaker? In terms of the recommendation with respect to the allowing persons in the area of the tenant of the units to do the work that has to be done, the repairs to the wells, the electrical upgrades and things like that. That is part of what we envisioned in the future. But the report, we haven't finished the inspection yet. The reports are still coming in. And these are things that we are hopeful. We are hopeful that we would be able to arrest the situation with respect to the problems that has surfaced in the Pine and the housing estates. But as I was saying, the occupation of the units and the policies in the past, where government, the interventions, you would know the $50 million loan fund, the housing credit fund, the general workers loan fund, the 50% mortgage, the having access to funding.
Yeah.
All of these things that we did in order to make, to allow people to graduate from low income, from units to the low income. And the question of the disposal of the units is also something that should never have happened in the way that it did.
True.
I mean, first, you restrict, you could have said what the last Democratic Party could have done. They could have closed down the National Housing Corporation. Close it down.
Yeah.
Because what you have done is you have incapacitated two-thirds of their earning power. Two-thirds. Two-thirds. You give the people the units. And there's only the one-third. And I mean, the member for St. Michael East is correct. Because then in the one-third in places like the Valerie and those you have low-income units, and you put in people in units, that is the policy. When you see people being thrown out of units, now, for want of a better word, it is not the Barbados Labour Party government that is ejecting them. It is that there's a policy that is there. The minister don't interfere in the workers of National Housing Corporation. So when a minister put someone in a unit in a Valerie, $750 a month, and tell the person, don't pay rent. And then that person goes, and the minister is even visiting, even now, like now. And then $50,000, how could you run up arrears? I mean, I don't understand how you could run up arrears, even over $10,000, but as high as $54,000. And then you come and you want to blame this government. You put people in units, tell them don't pay rent. And we have the evidence. We have the evidence. We have persons who when the inspectors went out, they refused to even entertain the inspectors, the wardens. You bring the police, and you don't bring the police to drag anybody out who cannot pay rent, like people with little children and things like that. My father used to call such people worthless people, you know, real worthless people go in the unit. Some of them even live elsewhere. I mean, they have houses elsewhere being rented out.
You have a problem.
But we were hoping that at least with the policies that we had put in place, the bonus you, the 50-year bonus, I mean, we did so much. We had so much interventions in housing during our term. so that you graduate then to the system whereby you would then be able to get a loan, 100% mortgage.
100%.
And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you are fully familiar.
That's right.
Because it is a program that was left when I left the ministry as Minister of Housing. Every single thing in there. I believe that my plan at that time was that every single person in Barbados would have been able to get a house.
On that policy, yes.
But now what they do, as I said, and getting back to the depleting of the America, go on and on and on.
Yep.
Depleted, no income coming in. The other 1/3, then you set the rent so high that the people cannot pay. But you have them in hotels because, I mean, to be honest with you, some of those units like hotels. But there is no graduation. So you're telling the people now that they can now own the unit, but you have not put the legislative framework in place where they could get a conveyance. So you're actually telling them I'm giving you something, but at the same time I hold it back something. You know, like a fella standing upon your foot and telling you to run. That's what the Democratic Labour Party has done to those poor people in those units. Because they're telling them, we are giving you these units. So they're taking them out the system. We are giving you these units. But they're standing on your feet and telling you, no, the maintenance is another issue, maintenance is another issue. Are telling you, but in order to get these units has to be certified by a structural engineer, and all of the other technical things have to be done. Now, a professional might be a poor professional, but he's no fool. A person ain't going to do law and come at me and know nothing at all. He got know something. He got his professional integrity, however misplaced it might be. However misplaced it might be. A structural engineer will go to Bell Plain housing area, will go in the Pine, will go in a housing estate and certify a building that is not built with ring bin. You've got to be, if I wasn't here, I would say what it will have to be. But you know what I'm talking about. Right. So nothing can happen. So a lot of them, they get, as the member for St. Michael E. said, they get the letters which they should not have got in the first place. But you can't do nothing, they can't move. You can't move. So that is the environment that the National Housing Corporation is in. Now, if the policy that we have put in place, where people could graduate, but then you won't have a problem, you wouldn't have to give the people units. Because what has happened is that a lot of those people, I'm surprised that we have senior government officials own units. They are either shut up or they're being used as pads. And many say pads, I mean real pads. Some people call it, you remember for St. Thomas will say brothels. Used as brothels, I'm telling you. And some of them shut up. And some of us as members of parliament, almost every day, I am being bombarded by my colleagues. Man, I see a house in this particular area, shut up. Remember for Christchurch, East Central could tell you that. And nothing can, and they are getting rent. They are getting more rent than even in those big units. I think that it is a cancer what has happened in the last 10 years. It's a cancer. I do not know how and if we will be able to solve it. I mean, the thing about it is that when we left, they had a program that they could run with it. So that even like if you take an example of the country towers, everything was there in place and they could go and build it. But now we can't even, there's nothing that they left that we could build on. And what is worse, I've spoken about it in this house already. What is worse, I mean, they had the opportunity of doing the things which would allow us to ease the problems in the Pine. I think they had, I may be wrong with the figures, $110 million loan from the CDB, and they knew they couldn't take it up. But the reports which were supposed to be submitted on a technicality, CDB they could not access the loan. They had the housing upgrading program, $80 million, and they did not utilize it.
Neighborhood upgrades.
They didn't utilize it. Another program which could have allowed people like those people in the Pine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you have to take your hat off to people like the member for St. Michael South to graduate himself from those conditions, to graduate himself, to take advantage of the opportunities which were available to him at the time. But everybody don't have the brain of the member for St. Michael South, so everybody, all the people who were living in the units could not have done that. But the framework was there, everything was there. But they stunt the program completely. So I cannot see how, I don't know. It is like a nightmare at this particular point in time. But rest assured,
You have to do something.
that we as a government will ensure that we do whatever is required to make the member for St. Michael Southeast might not be happy now with what has happened. I could understand that because, as I said, I could understand if somebody in White Hill had died in the circumstances. But we have to ensure. I can't say that it is not something that cannot happen again. But we have to try to make sure that it does not happen again. And this resolution is just another resolution for vesting land in the National Housing Corporation in the hope that we will be able to do the type of sites and services that we have done in the past. As I speak, we are meeting almost on a daily basis to ensure that we come up with the type of programs which will allow low-income people to surface again. And because, you know, these are trying times, because we still have to take into consideration people's pockets. It doesn't make sense. You're going out there and you're building, putting up structures, and then the head people that you want to help are the head people that are not able to pay. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, all I could tell you, or all I would ask this House to do, is to stop the blame game. The members of the National Housing Corporation, the National Housing Corporation, has been dealt. I mean, and I could go on and on with many instances, has been dealt a hard hand. The government of Barbados has been dealt a hard hand. The minister has been dealt a hard hand. But we have tried. We must try to ensure that we do our best. That at least another the incidents of what we have seen in the Pine will not be replicated. We are hoping that with the planning gains, with the actual relocation of persons in the Pine area, there are situations where, I mean, I was astounded in some instances where you have as many as 20 people in one unit. 20 people living in one unit. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but I saw it, and I think that we are going all out with the planning gains that the Prime Minister spoke about to ensure that we arrest this problem. But it is not something that is going to happen overnight. It is not something that is going to happen overnight. It's going to take us time. And I would like to warn the people of Barbados, or to advise the people of Barbados, never again allow the type of vagabonds that we've had in the last 10 years to occupy these holiday offices. Otherwise, we would go back to the same situation again. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I'm obliged to you, and I ask that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All members in favor say aye. Those against say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution does not pass.
Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 5:30. 5:30?
5:30?
Yeah.
Someone second it? Question is that this will be now suspended until 5:30 this afternoon. All members in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This House is now suspended until 5:30.